This was round 13, April 7th, 1959. Bernardo Wexler, born in Bucharest, Romania, born to Jewish parents on April 1st, 1925. His family emigrated to Argentina when he was 7 years of age. As a chess player, his career began after World War II. He was awarded the International Master title later this same year because it was in this year that Wexler won the 37th Argentine Championship at Buenos Aires, as well as the 1959 Buenos Aires JM tournament. So, 2 good tournament wins in a row earned him the International Master title. He retired as a court official, and he passed away in Buenos Aires in June of 1988, June 30th to be exact. In this game, he deploys the English opening against Bobby, and of course the Anglo-Indian defense, which immediately transposes to a King's Indian after d4 and g6. Knight c3 and bishop g7 is the normal variation. Right here we have Smyslov's variation with bishop g5. I hope you know the name Vasily Smyslov, world champion right after Botvinnik, well, in the midst of Botvinnik. Botvinnik was defeated by Smyslov in the 50s. I think it was it 55, 56, mid-50s, and then Botvinnik won the title back. Then Tal won it in 1960, and Botvinnik won it back, and then Petrosian won it, and Botvinnik did not win it back. Anyways, Smyslov's variation, bishop g5, pawn d6. It's slightly more popular to castle first, and then after e3 play pawn d6. But it's not a big deal. After bishop e2, we get queen's knight to d7 and knight f3. And by the way, the move order is not so important up here because it can transpose either way. c6, and then after castles, we have h6 as the most common move. Coming back to here, you can also just start with knight f3, and it turns out to be the same after queen's knight to d7 and bishop e2. Same thing, just different. Let's go back here. Bobby Fischer here played the line with d6, knight f3, castles, e3, c5. I personally actually like to play knight bd7 at this point, but this is another line that kind of comes out in the wash. Well, I'm not actually going to play c5 in this line. I'll play c6. So, for example, bishop e2, and then c6, and then castles. And then here again, you just play the h6 and get rid of this bishop. Let's go back. Bobby with c5 here, and bishop e2 and h6. And once again, we've seen all of this previously. After bishop h4, g5, and bishop g3, knight h5 hits that bishop, and white castles. That's not the most common move. D takes c5 is more common. It is probably a sharper line. So here I might play knight takes the bishop, pawn takes the knight, and after d takes c5, this question has to be answered. And it's usually going to be answered by queen c2. Now, a very counterintuitive move is the pawn to e6. Counterintuitive because it blocks my bishop, but it's meant to support both f5 and d5. Keep this pesky knight from any kind of infiltration while also helping to support f5. On rook d1, my queen will escape to e7. Wow, that's given a question mark? Right, and then g4 was in my mind. And after knight c6, developing a3 here. So my move order seems to be in a bit of question from the annotator. b6 is what I'd play here. Bishop d3, forming this battery, and rook d8. Or bishop b7 is probably slightly more principled. Let's go back. Castles by Wexler and Bobby with knight c6. Pawn d5 hits that knight, knight a5. Now, I want to point out something that might interest you. You see the annotator calling for knight takes the bishop. Well, actually, someone you may know played knight takes bishop last year. His name is Kostya Kavutsky, one of the 3 Chess Dojo Live hosts. Kostya Kavutsky played knight takes the bishop last year against Lars Andreasen. So a position that has been reached quite recently. In this game, Bobby with knight a5. We get rook c1, pawn a6. Position's really equal. I know it says 0.3 for white. That's equal in human terms. Knight d2 here, battery attacking this knight. So now knight takes the bishop. Bishop pawn takes the knight. Unusual. We always encourage our students to capture toward the center, unless there's a very, 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 very good reason. Now, perhaps Wexler said, I have a very, 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 very good reason, and that's to take advantage of this file with my rook. So, who can argue with that logic? e6 from Bobby, and right, black should try bishop d7, but e6 it is. Queen c2, pawn takes the d-man, knight takes the d-man. Now bishop e6. Bishop d3 gets this battery after all. The bot calling for his knight to e4. I was actually still thinking about getting these rooks doubled, so I'm looking at either rook f2 or even here g4. Let's take a look at both moves. Rook f2 with the idea of queen's rook to f1. That's a thumbs up. And what about g4? An exclam. Oh, it changed it. It downgraded me. Bishop d3, though, being frowned upon by our fickle annotator. b5, b3, rook b8, rook b1, and the bishop to f5 being called for. It might be in order. It puts the question to our bishop after all. Knight e4 might be worth considering here as well. Of course, then that would invite me to play f5. No, but I'm cited as inaccurate there. Rook b1, though, getting a big red X. Knight back to c6 here. Bishop e4. King h8. Yeah, knight b4 is probably more appropriate here, although that will be answered by knight takes the knight. And then after pawn takes the knight, we're looking okay there. Maybe pawn takes c4 should be considered here as well. Let's see what we get. He'll probably take it with the knight here. I get a thumbs up for this move. And my point now is I'm going to push this pawn and hit this bishop. I get a star for that. Force the bishop to move. All right, king h8 from Fischer. C takes b5. Yeah, rook bd1 is a good move to keep the balance. You've got a half-open file. Put your rook on that file. It looks at my queen. It looks at my backward pawn. All in all, a pretty good-looking move. C takes b5, played by Wexler, and the eval bar scooching up toward the top slightly. Well, pawn takes pawn, and any minute now, I've pointed this f5 potential out already several times, but it is looming here. a4, and based on the threat of f5, I'd be very tempted to play g4. Bishop takes g4 would not be good. Let's first look at what the bot thinks about a4. It gets a question mark. Let's go back and put on g4 and note that bishop takes g4 is not a good move because this black bishop is serving an important role, and that is to control the d5 square. So you see we get a question mark for that move, although the eval bar didn't budge. but on principle, you really want to control right here. Coming back, A4 was played, and F5 finally is unleashed. We've got this pressure against the knight, potentially winning move. He played knight F4, quite a move. Now, why knight F4? Well, let's talk about the different options. You can't really move your bishop anywhere, because if you come back, I'm pushing forward, right? And that defense becomes immediately compromised. Actually, I think I don't have to push forward. I think I can, because if I push forward, he can still play knight F4. Yeah, no, I have to take this. What I'm going to do is take this one. Yeah, I get an exclam for that. And the point now is if you bishop takes, I'm forking your queen and bishop. Knight B4. And you don't have a good way to defend the bishop. So I'm picking up the bishop free for nothing. Anyway, knight F4, quite a move. Now, you've got two captures you can make. Which one? Well, you don't want to play pawn takes the bishop. You might be tempted to, but the problem is if you play pawn takes the bishop, oof, you're getting a fork on the recapture. Ouch, that hurts, right? Ow. That was, painful. So painful. Now, I can buy a tempo, but I have to put my queen somewhere, and white is better coordinated and a little more active. He'll probably trade this knight off for my bishop, and then this pawn is going to fall one way or the other. So, pawn takes the knight. Do not allow the Forkosaurus. Bishop takes the knight right there. Pawn takes the E-man, hitting the knight. Knight F3. Pawn takes the A-man. And I am surprised by bishop takes A4. It gets a star, but I'd be very tempted to play pawn takes the pawn, creating an outside pass pawn. How can that be inaccurate? Oh my goodness, I don't understand how that could be inaccurate. I've created a passed pawn. Apparently, it's not the best move. Bishop takes pawn is. Now, bishop D5 was played here, and the obvious threat is bishop to E4, creating the skewer. However, Ficklebot doesn't like this either. Queen E2. Well, I guess you have got a point there. I'm giving Bobby another pass pawn at the cost, that's the cost for my pass pawn, is to give Bobby a third passed pawn. That's not a bad point by a Greyhound player. And those pawns look ominous, don't they? So Queen E2, better, Rook B E1 is even, either of these two moves are better, I think. Rook B E1, or Rook B D1. Rook B D1 threatens the bishop. But Queen to E2 was tried. Bishop D4. Now Rook B D1. And the best try seems to be knight takes bishop in my mind. The bot calling for the pawn to B5. Not sure how that is any better. Or B4, I should say. If I take this, you're compelled to take this. And now there's no pawn here to stop my pawn on B4. Another option might be to try to reroute this bishop. What's bishop B5 get? Doesn't like it. No, it's insisting on B4 right here. Oh, because the pawn's overworked either way. Right. So you can never take anyway. Okay. All right. Little slow tonight, aren't I? Rook B D1 was played. Queen F6. Do not take this pawn. You may be thinking, hey, that's got two attackers and only one defender, but that's not as good. Bishop takes pawn, bishop takes the bishop, rook takes the bishop, but now knight takes the bishop, pawn takes here, and queen to C4 hits our rookie, and it's not going to end well. This guy is jeopardized. I have to defend my rook. This guy is jeopardized. This rook is overworked. Yeah, that's actually going to solve it. Give up the rook. Ooh, yes, a double exclam. Is that the first one I got tonight? And the point here is Queen C8, Forkosaurus wins back the material with interest. Nice. Double exclam for Coach Daniel. Always love to get those. A lot better than the derogatory marks. Queen f6 here from Bobby. Knight h4, queen e6, knight back to f3, rook b4, king to h1, rook takes the bishop. And speaking of double exclams, Bobby scores one of his own. Note that the pawn is overworked. It cannot cover the c4 square and take the rook. And guess what? When you take my rook, bishop c4 creates the skewer. That rhymes. Wexler tries to capture here with a hit on my queen. But after pawn takes the knight, queen to b2, super attacking this one, e2. Oh, that is going to be catastrophic. He tries queen takes pawn. It comes with check after all. King h7, king's rook to e1, and he's not going to have time to move because we're just going to take this. This was a clever try. But it's no good because I'm promoting to a queen and pinning your rook to your king so you can't take my queen. Delicious. Queen takes the new queen. Queen f6 gets out of danger. Queen c1 hits the bishop. Bishop d3 moves to safety. And that's where Bernardo Wexler resigned. He has had enough. He's got a passed pawn for our bishop, but that is simply insufficient to overcome Black's advantage. In this game, Bobby Fischer scored an accuracy of 93.3, a single game rating of 2,800. He certainly got the better of Bernardo Wexler. Not only great in the opening, but simply capitalizing in the middle game. Speaking of the opening, though, Wexler's opening was impeccable, was it not? But Bobby just superior in that middle game, achieving the position that stands before your eyes. Really good game.